friends, it's Carly. I'm popping in here real quick before the episode to give a content warning on this particular episode. It does get into some pretty hard topics there towards the end that relate to Dan's time in Africa, right? We follow the life of the person and what they lived through, and telling some of those stories took us into some places that might be uncomfortable for some listeners, so please use your discretion and be advised that if you want to skip this one, that's no problem at all. Hello out there, and welcome back to my grocery adventure. My name is Carly Wharton, and I am your host of this adventure of these podcast episodes. This podcast for people who want to make an impact in the world. And as we're seeing with each guest, that can take on so many forms, and even for one person can evolve over the course of a life. So it is so cool that we get the opportunity to hear these deep dive versions of people's stories. And our guest today, we are rejoined by Dan Nagengast. Welcome back for your fourth episode, Dan. It is so awesome to have you. Oh, you are officially the first person in MGA history to go to the fourth episode in your story. And I think it's a testament to just how many parts of the story there are and that are interesting to hear about. So thank you for indulging us with the long version. Sure. I appreciate it. We did 3 episodes already, and those are available on the channel. So if you haven't watched those yet, I mean, they do go in order chronologically. Feel free to catch up and watch them in order, or be a rebel, take this one in first, do whatever works best for you. But today we are picking back up with Dan's story in the middle of his Africa journey and the many different places and countries in Africa that journey took him to. Dan, maybe give us just a couple bullet points of, what took you to Africa in the first place, and lead us up to where we left off last time as far as starting to offer the training for the Peace Corps people who were coming into country and setting that up in the couple of locations I think that you did that.
Well, I finished law school, and I felt like I wasn't worldly, that
right.
Everybody in the world knew more about the world than I did. And I was a product of a small town, Western Nebraska. And I had finished college and I'd gone to law school in New York, but I still felt like, God, what do I know? And in fact, I didn't know anything, and I probably still don't know anything, but I'm out there trying to find something out.
Sure.
And anyway, I applied for Peace Corps. They tried to put me in a legal situation in the Pacific, and that fell through. And so I fell back on my farm background, which is excellent for most agricultural projects. I mean, a lot of it's not knowing exactly rice culture or how to build a swamp, but sort of the farm kids understanding that, oh, I guess I can figure this out and do this. And you knew how to use tools and all that kind of stuff, and everything from welding to whatever else. So that led me to Sierra Leone and paddy rice, which I had never seen a plant of rice before. I had eaten it, of course, but it was new to me. And the way we were doing it was different for Sierra Leoneans too at the time. It was a transition from upland rice grown on slash and burn agriculture forests down into the paddies and into sort of Southeast Asian or Chinese style, which is a 4,000, 5,000-year-old type of agriculture on the same land that it's always been on. So it's sort of something that people should have paid attention to, and maybe a lot of people are more and more now. Then I transitioned to Mali, and the one place that people know there is Timbuktu, and I was about 35 kilometers from Timbuktu, growing irrigated millet and sorghum, but mainly wheat, and which it's all growing. You're right at the base of the Sahara, so it's all irrigated crops pretty much up there. And I finished that up, and that was I don't know, really, it was a way to become worldly. It was to move away from everything in the world. There was no electricity, there were no latrines, there was nothing up there that was from the world other than French cigarettes, which you can get those in the
What
middle
else
of
do you
nowhere. But
need? Yeah, you're the staples.
so I finished up there, and then I'm part of my deal coming to Mali with Peace Corps was that I'd run a training for them in a village, which they had never done. All their training had taken place either in cities or in the U.S. or whatever, and I had some experience in helping to get a city ready for a bunch of 22-year-old Americans, or a village ready for that, and getting Americans ready for villages, and they're worlds apart and expectations are different, and mores in the U.S. are not mores in a Muslim country. It's just not the way it is. And so, trying to teach discretion and politeness and, honoring people's situations and how they live and all that kind of stuff. And there's a lot of things in both societies to be upset about. And so it was trying to help people not be upset and to understand what was going on, and that all of it has reasons, both in our society and other societies, and that understanding that and not judging it, but just sort of seeing what's going on is really the best place to try to come from when working in places like that. So I did a
Oh.
training outside of Bamako, probably 40 minutes or so. So you
And
could
how
run.
long are these trainings? Like, what does that actually look
It was
like?
probably 8 to 11 weeks. I can't remember
Oh,
that
wow.
particular.
Okay.
So it's 2 or 3 months, and people get to know the people they live with pretty well, and vice versa. That sort of thing. And there are problems that arise, and people find out they're not suited for it. I always said anybody who joined Peace Corps running away from something was probably going to have a lot of problems. People
Mm,
who are running towards something were going to have the time of their lives, and I think that and then there's every gradation in between, but
sure.
it's like the Foreign Legion. I give up. I'm going to go fight and get killed. Is that's historically what some people have done. And Peace Corps shouldn't be like that at all. And consequently, I think there's probably around 300,000 Peace Corps volunteers, ex Peace Corps volunteers. Not a huge number in a country of 320 million people, but some of them are the most wide awake people and understanding people about other cultures that
Mm,
you're ever going to find, and move easily uh, in relationships with other people. So they're like a huge asset to this country that is known on a micro scale. People
mm,
know that. Sierra Leone has a Friends of Sierra Leone, and a group here, and half of the members are Sierra Leoneans who live in the U.S., and the other half are white Peace Corps volunteers and black Peace Corps volunteers, and
mhm.
they have a good time together. They
Yeah.
understand each other, and it's just rare to have that kind of intimate, close relationships with other people. I mean, uh, this country is a country of immigrants, so people come here and learn how to live. Uh, and so people, obviously, people can learn how to be an American. I mean, we've got 300 years of that going on, or 400 or 500 years of that, and some of that's nasty history too. I mean, that's certainly the case, but um, Peace Corps volunteers gives you a little different slant to there, and it's sort of accepting of humanity, maybe more than otherness. So
Yeah.
anyway, that training was what that was all about.
Yeah.
And there were some volunteers that clearly shouldn't be there, and or were there for the wrong reasons. And some of them stayed and became good volunteers, and others just flamed out, and others didn't make it through training. And
Yeah.
that's true of every Peace Corps training and every
And
cohort that
everything
comes.
in general,
Yeah,
probably. But
yeah, that's true.
to your
Yeah,
point of people run away and join all kinds of things for
they go to college.
reasons that are, I mean, exactly. I mean, lots of people make big changes and then some of them figure it out and they use it to
Yeah.
make themselves a better person. And some people don't get it. And I don't know if that's necessarily unique to the Peace Corps.
Well, I've never been I never, when I was like 8 years old, said I'm going to be a brain surgeon, or I've never been directed towards anything like that. And frankly, I don't know I never knew what I was going to do next.
Yeah.
Uh, that doesn't mean I never knew I was going to do anything. I knew I was going to do something, and it was a series of waiting for doors to open.
Yeah.
I think I've said this before, and deciding which one to go through, knowing that the second you step through, you're off on something that you don't control or know where it's going or any of that stuff.
Right. Could you have
So,
seen that like Africa was going to turn into what it did when you left, like the very first day that you like get your little suitcase and like fly over there?
I mean, you were just continually puzzled. You just continually, what's
What's
going
going
on?
on?
Yeah, yeah. Um, and it's everything. It's the food you eat. It's your body odor. I mean, everything changes. It's
Wow.
how you spend your day. It's how do you go to the toilet? It's how do you
Yeah.
wash yourself? How do you get your clothes cleaned? How do you get anywhere? It's all different. It's all based on poverty.
Mm.
You know, I mean, we pretty much buy solutions to every issue we have.
Throw
Or
some money at it. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Make it more comfortable.
yeah,
You know?
yeah.
Yeah.
So your food was continually, if not fresh, certainly wasn't processed. I mean,
Mm.
smoked, dried or smoked fish was about, that was the process. Uh, fufu or something like that. It was processed food, but it was processed. It's cassava that's changed. Right there in the uh, kitchen hut
Mm.
by whoever was cooking. That sort of thing.
Like you processed it
Yeah,
yourself.
yeah. Palm oil has to be taken from the palm. Somebody's got to climb that tree, get it down on the ground, cook it.
Like there's no
Get some.
bottle of palm oil
Yeah,
that you're picking up
yeah,
at the store. Like, I mean,
and then
that's
you get it.
that's primitive for not that
Yeah,
long ago. That's
and then you get it in a glass jar or a jug. And if you look too closely, you'll see it was malathion. A glass jar is worth a lot. A jug was worth a lot. A plastic, 4-liter oil container was like, oh man, where did I get a hold of one of those? I mean, there are no, there at the time there were no like trash middens around a village where people threw their cans because there were no cans. I mean, anything that was out there was a broken piece of ceramic pottery or something like that. But
mm,
everything, it's just like a container was valuable, even if it had been a pesticide
yeah.
and it showed up in your food system. I mean, it's washed and all that kind of stuff, but still, we don't do that, do we? I mean, we don't save
No,
our
yeah, you probably
pesticide jugs.
wouldn't.
No,
No,
no, it's
wouldn't be
throw
repurposing
that
to
away.
that extent.
So
So,
anyway, that was the end of Mali, but I did a couple more trainings. I did one in a couple of short-term things in Senegal, and another training down in the Gambia. I don't know if you what the Gambia is. It's a country that's on a river, and it's about 10 miles wide, and it's a former British colony, and it's 10 miles wide because that's how far a gunboat could shoot, and so it's completely surrounded by Senegal, which was a French colony. So the British had this river, and they were surrounded by the French, and there was an ethnic group on the south side of the river and another one on the north side of the river. And it was one of these colonial compressions of people who, I wouldn't say hated living together, but had always lived together, but certainly weren't happy that they were now in a country where they were outnumbered by people from another ethnic group. Most of that part of the world has been long, I'll use the word colonized by Islam. And that's not a word that they would like. And it's not the same as, an economic sort of colonialism, but a lot of it was won with the sword. I mean, it was like, you'll convert to Islam or else. And that Islam in West Africa at the time was fine. It was gentle. It was respectful of people. It offered some, I think, a better way to deal with other people than the animistic religions had particularly done. Although those could have been fine, or are still fine in some other parts of the world. But it was an order that it protected people, and then all of that can just break up, with if a match is struck, and it can be just devastating what happens. I've been thinking a lot lately about what happened to Sierra Leone after I left, and it was a soldier in Liberia, next door country, and Liberia, as Sierra Leone, Liberia was governed by an elite that were resettled Americans and black Canadians, and other people from Britain that were, sort of, they left their colonial countries and were resettled back there. Sierra Leone was British. That elite, the Creoles, was a British enclave, and it was made up of people who were captured by British gunboats, slave ships. When British decided to outlaw slavery, they would capture these slave ships, bring everybody to Freetown, Sierra Leone, and let them loose. And that group became sort of the governing cohort of the country too. Anyway, in Liberia, a sergeant killed the President, I guess Tolbert was it, and basically he was the guy who pulled the trigger. And he became the president of a country of, I don't know, a couple million people. And if you looked at the pictures of it, it was a real bloody assassination of the ruling party. And if you look at his pictures, he just gets, I mean, I do too, but just gets, he's this thin young, soldier, and he just gets fatter and fatter, and he just starts, living the life of luxury until the same thing happens to him in a bloody
Doesn't it
coup.
always? I mean,
Well, in Africa, it often did. I remember
places.
being in Washington, D.C. at the National Institute of Health because I picked up schistosomiasis, which is it's a disease in the rice swamps, and I ended up staying in a house full of, I think there were 3 or 4 women who were former Peace Corps volunteers from Latin America, and they were all "Viva la Revolution." We need, we need to kick these people out. They're big into the Catholic liberation theology. That was like, we just need revolution. In Africa, it's just at the time anyway. It was just here's the new boss, same as the old boss. It was just somebody grabbing on, holding on, milking it for what he could do, and then him getting overthrown. Mm-hmm. So the new guy came in Liberia. He's looking for money to buy arms from Libya, and who also wants a revolution, because Liberia was such an American stronghold. We had all kinds of military stuff there. So Gaddafi wanted to kind of, goad that tiger a bit, and he started a war which started trying to get the diamonds out of Sierra Leone, which was the Blood Diamond story. I don't know if you've ever seen that movie, but it was just bloody. And he had a child army group, 12, 13-year-olds, 9, 10, gave them AK-47s and kept them drugged, and they would just kill anybody. And it was just this brutal thing that took these 2 peaceful countries and just turned them into absolute horrendous messes. So I left sweet Sierra Leone. It turned to hell. I mean, a literal hell on the face of the earth. And now it's worked its way back to stability and back to being a nice place again. So that kind of stuff can just happen. And there's an assumption, that would never happen here in the U.S. And of course, it has happened once here in the U.S. and could happen again. There's just some stories there. Anyway, that's not about the Gambia or Senegal, but
So
it's a
your
little,
your second training was in Gambia? Is
yeah, in
that
the
did
Gambia.
I okay.
That
So
was great.
how was that different culturally?
Well, the first, I think the 3 days after we started, we got all the volunteers in, spent a day or two in Banjul, which is the capital. Took them all the way up country on roads, got them installed in their new village. The village was so happy. They they baptized me and the son of, as the first son of the chief, really
Oh,
excellent paramount chief, named Boj. I was Lamine Boj, the first son of Boj. And then I think 2 days later, the woman who was cooking, so we everybody would come to a common place to eat rather than force that on people. They would have, Saturday, Sunday they may eat with their family, but generally there was a big meal. So I think it's the second or third day, the child of the cook came down with meningitis. So they're cooking for about, I don't know, 60 Americans who are all mostly 21, 22, 23-year olds. I mean, the perfect meningitis age, it just doesn't get any better for meningitis than to find a bunch of people that age and then get their cook sick. And so, and, those new volunteers were like me going, what's going on? What's going, just wide eyed. And, oh, by the way, you're now exposed to meningitis. I mean, this is, why did I come here? That sort of thing. The
well,
embassy
it's
was
like
really good.
first thing too of like,
Yeah, it
yeah,
really,
here's the
really,
risk. Let's just
there's always
stop
things that
that.
happen, but this one was like, this is perfect storm type stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
The U.S. embassy within, I don't know, 18 hours had prophylactic medication for everybody in the village, plus all the volunteers. It was like, whoa, you know, and
Wow.
nobody got it. So it was like,
That's
you
so
know,
fortunate.
they came through. It was really, really excellent. But there for a while, you start worrying about some volunteers saying, "Get me out of here. I need to get back." All that kind of stuff. And so trying to keep everybody even keeled through all that.
Your
And
your stories, especially these last couple, it sounds like you're such a harmonizer in the middle of people and like a shock absorber for crisis and fear and like, do you feel
well,
that way in the middle of it or
the hair on fire responses never helps. Just
there are
never.
people that still do it, let me tell you
My
that.
hair is on fire. So she said, "Why? Don't let your hair get on fire."
How dare your hair
It's
be
just
on fire?
you just
Yeah.
have to figure out. Well, how can we not panic? How do we work through this? That sort of thing. I
Yeah.
don't know if that was my farm upbringing or that was 5 years in Africa or what, but we just got through that and moved on.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, um, there was at one point this was in Mali. There was a woman of Peace Corps volunteer who said she had been raped by the head of the household. He was this kindly, I don't know, probably 70-year-old guy. And so I have a lot of staff who's Malian, and I'm going, have you ever heard of this? And they go, never have they ever heard. And her story was that he was nude and he walked across this compound, which would have had 40 people, in there in the middle of the night and came in and raped her. And so, fortunately, there was an American. She was just there with her family visiting, but she was a psychotherapist. And so I said, we need to get you some therapy right away. And so this woman worked with her, and little by little found out that this is like the third or fourth time she had claimed something like this had happened, and that there was a real question about whether this was a delusional thing. And from all the Malians' perspectives, men and women, it's like no Malian has ever done this. It was just, and that was before Me Too and all that kind of stuff. So we said, probably be best for you to go back, whatever happened, whether it happened or not. This is getting you off to a bad start here, and maybe you should go back to the U.S. and that sort of settled it. But that would have blown up. That would have
Mhm.
blown up Peace Corps entirely in Mali. That would have ended that. us being there. I mean,
Yeah.
and so you're faced with this moral dilemma of this woman who's in distress. Maybe she's right. It
Mm.
didn't seem like she would be right. If she was right, Peace Corps Molly was out of the country. I mean, it was just gone. And I don't know the answer to it yet, but I personally think the woman had a lot of psychiatric issues that led to this. And I remember just sitting with the trainer. I mean, these are educated Malians going, what do you think? And like, absolutely, no one had ever heard of anything like this
Mm.
ever happening. The guy had this, he was a village elder. He was kindly. He was nice. He was just, it was just like nobody on the Malian side believed it, and I sort of didn't believe it either. But I had to kind of, so that was kind of
Still
hair on fire.
marshal the situation. Like,
Yeah, yeah. And I don't know how it would be resolved today. I mean, Americans have changed since 1970, whatever that was, 78 or 9. The whole understanding that this kind of crap's been going on in the US for years, and you should believe women. That wasn't there at the time, unjustly. I think unjustly so.
well, and that was my first thought with like, nobody's ever heard of it. I'm like, yeah, well, that used to be
Yeah,
the way
well,
it is
that's
here
true.
too.
That's true. Yeah,
Nobody was allowed to say anything.
yeah,
Nobody
yeah,
was believed if they said anything.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
that was the truth kind of everywhere. And
Sure.
so
No,
it
I
doesn't
agree with that. I
surprise
agree with that.
me that
Yeah.
they
Uh-huh.
didn't have a culture of knowing about it. I don't think
Yeah.
anybody had a culture of knowing about it at
Yeah.
that point in
Yeah.
time,
I agree.
you
I
know?
agree.
So, and at that
So,
point, I hear, I've been in situations where you are the one responsible for a group of people. And so
hmm
then it's like really getting into the lived experience of figuring out people's rights and
hmm
the bigger picture of the right of the
hmm
all compared to the right of the individual. Like these
hmm
are really easy things to like abstractly kind of brush off. Like, oh no, you should have done it exactly like this. It's like when you are in the
I don't
middle,
know.
there's no black and white.
Mm,
There's only like the
yeah.
best you can do in that situation. And so, I have compassion for people of the past who did not have
Mhm.
the benefit of what we know
Mhm.
now, of like what
I
has
agree.
been the curtains that
I
have been
agree.
pulled back. And like they can be kindly men and they can still be monsters behind closed doors.
Plus, it
Okay.
happens all the time here now anyway.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's part of our culture and all that kind of stuff. The woman, the psychotherapist was a woman, like a
Mhm.
35, 37-year-old woman, and so I just had to rely on her, who basically entered into a therapy relationship even on her on her spring vacation. So,
I'm sure she's
and
a helper. That's probably
yeah,
much
and
as what
and
she'd want to do anyway.
and she began to doubt it too. So
Mm.
and so I
Well,
relied on her. Yeah, I
That's
know.
that's the hard part of like, lying is not something that is co-opted
No,
by men. I mean, human
no,
beings have the capacity for deceit, and we do it for all kinds of reasons, and it does happen. And so, what do you
um,
believe? Like, I get that, especially again, when you have
yeah.
responsibilities that are a bigger picture and the right of the individual, like you balance it all as best you can and hope like hell that you did the right thing, because, yeah.
Well, those cultures were, I mean, pretty. I think I know of one rape of a Peace Corps volunteer in all the years I was in Africa. The Islamic cultures really are very as sexualized as our culture is. They're the opposite. On the other hand, you can have four wives, and all that kind of stuff. And on the other hand, if a war breaks down, everybody gets raped. I mean, it's sort of like there's
Mm.
this really proper, you know, and then every Islamic situation is different too. But in West Africa at the time, it was. I mean, anybody could go anywhere. I mean, there were all kinds of women Peace Corps volunteers never fearing for their lives like you didn't have to in this country. It was just like you could just do that sort of thing. It was just not that way. I don't know if it's that way now, you know. But at that time, it was pretty sweet living there. The war broke out, and you better run and hide if you're a, a girl over 9 years old. I mean, up to 80. I mean, it just went from that to that in in 6 months. We're getting off subject,
Well, I
but
mean,
anyway, it was another training where suddenly I'm dealing
yeah,
with that too,
yeah,
and it was like, and then there was a suicide, not in the amongst the trainees, but a friend of mine, he committed suicide, and that was in the middle of that training, and so it's like,
that's a dark passage of
there's
time right
there's
there.
some hard there's some things.
Wow.
I mean, that can happen in college too. I mean, all that stuff can happen, but when you're far from home and sort of the sands under your feet are not, you don't know if there's any sand under your feet. It's really kind of scary.
Mm.
Anyway, that was the
Oh,
Gambia. That was uh,
wow.
so then I went back to New York, went to and DC, and went to several places and think tanks, and thought about trying to find a job, working for a nonprofit or whatever. And I got offered a job to go back to Mali immediately, and I wasn't. I thought I wanted to see more of the world, and so I went to Church World Service, which is it's the arm of the National Council of Churches, which are the big sort of liberal, Methodist, Presbyterians, American Baptists, not Southern Baptists, Disciples, Church of UCC, all those big, liberal churches. That was their um, relief and development agency. And so I went to work for them in Senegal, and I was running a project with a Senegalese partner. His name was Amadou Cisse, and we had like 15, 20 staff people, all Senegalese, and one French agricultural engineer. And we worked in 8 villages, and we basically asked these villages, what do you want to do? And so we had everything from poultry projects with women to village pharmacies, to fencing to keep Mauritanians on their camels out of their sorghum fields, to fisheries, to gardening, to
Yeah,
well drilling. I mean, just on and on and on. Anything that they wanted to do, we tried to do.
yeah,
And some of those were successful and some weren't. But I got to know these villages really well and spent a lot of time um, in these 8 villages. And in every situation I was in Mali, I ended up working in numerous villages around
mhm,
there. So this was the way it was.
yeah.
Um,
So how
this
long
that
did
was the
you go back to the States, and then how long were you back in? Uh,
That's probably 3 months, so I went to see friends and stuff like that, and went to DC, went to, I think it was Save the Children up in, um, Rhode Island. I just dropped in there, and that's who offered me the job in Mali. I had lots of friends in New York because I'd lived in New York, and so I had places to stay almost all those places,
yeah,
and New York was, New York is always fun. I've always enjoyed New York, and so I'd hang with friends and and I got this job, and I just ended up staying there and got trained for probably 2, 3 weeks, a month, I don't know, then headed off. My boss in Mali, the guy who ran the Church World Service office, was a guy named Lionel de Rinincourt, who was a Haitian refugee, had been tortured by Baby Doc. His hair turned white in prison when he was 25 or 26 or so. And he had a wife and 3 lovely children. And so when I'd come down to Dakar, which is the capital of Senegal, I'd stay with him. And there was a diaspora of Haitians in Senegal. I mean, doctors and dentists and artists.
hmm,
And at one point we went to it was an artist colony down on the coast amongst the baobabs, and it was almost all Haitians, or a lot of more Haitians.
hmm,
And you go, God, you think of all these capable. I mean, everybody who was capable was run out of that country, had to escape when the Duvaliers were there. So anyway, and Lionel, he was like, came back and became an executive in, I don't know, the Presbyterian Church or something like that. He was extremely capable, energetic person who could never go back to where he came from, So the opposite of why I was I was out roaming the world because I wanted to learn more. He was forced out of his, thing. So
That's wild. I mean, we can, cross paths with people who got there very differently than we did, and yet we're standing right beside them, living the same life for a moment. Like this life is a wild adventure. Um, so you went back to, was it Senegal? That was where the Churchill place was. And how long were you there in that stint?
I was there a little over 2 years.
Okay.
And I'm trying to think, where is it? I mean, it was a Senegal of all those countries had the most, was the government was the best run of all those governments. They were considered, but they were a playground for the French. Some of their beaches were there. They were, so the French had put a lot more into the infrastructure than the British did in these other countries, more than the French did in Mali. Mali had been was the French had planned to make it the breadbasket of France, so they put a lot of money into these huge agricultural perimeters, water irrigation from the Niger River, and then they have 10 French running 50,000 acre sort of things, and the French would basically go mad and kill each other and cheat on each other. And I mean, it's like a history. When I was in Bamako for 3 months learning, I was learning French there. There were 4 wives of Frenchmen who committed suicide. It was sort of like, it was a place that drove Europeans mad, for some reason, because it's really isolated. It's far from everywhere, and I suppose if you were a spouse, it was even worse. But there were, lovers that killing each other. There was all kinds of stuff going on there. I mean, it's like
A wild frontier.
Somalians are going, geez,
People are hostile.
these are the people who say they're superior to us. I mean, it was just like, but anyway,
Interesting.
Senegal was not like that at all. Senegal had a real functioning bureaucracy and civil service and stuff like that. So if you got stopped by the police, it was a real police stop. It wasn't a shakedown or anything like that. I mean, every other place you either had to talk your way out of it or you had to pay a bribe. But the Senegalese, it was pretty straight up and down, straightforward.
Yeah.
And so our staff were all trained. And I remember at the time, there was a statistic that there were 10,000 Senegalese with master's degrees or higher, either from the University of Senegal or from universities in France, without jobs in Senegal because there was no money to pay for jobs. So when Church World Service was there, I mean, one of the agreements to get there and work was that you provide salaries for civil servants because the government just didn't have the money there. The French took what they had done. Their form of colonialism in Senegal was raising peanuts called groundnuts or arachide, and it was get farmers to quit growing food crops and grow peanuts for peanut oil refineries and in France, and then they would ship peanut oil to Vietnam or Indochine or around the world to their other colonies, that sort of thing. And that was the model there. I mean, in other places that the French had another one called Le Truisme, which was sort of hole digging, which was what they did when there was, you know, bauxite or potassium or something like that. You leave a hole, you know, that's what
Mm.
the colony is all about, is the hole. And this was kind of they would call it la traite de la vache, the milk cow theory. You milk that country. I mean, it sounds like I'm being cynical, but they were the ones that were cynical. It was like, man, you know, the things they did. But the French and to some extent the Portuguese, they welcomed these, you know, people they were conquering as French citizens or Portuguese citizens, and so then it was harder for them to deny it when suddenly the French or, you know, the Senegalese are smarter than they are, or know more than they do, or, you know, that sort of thing. And if you look at the history of Algeria, where, you know, the French used Algeria as a place to offset excess population. So they just, and so did the Italians in North Africa. So they just started sending people there, and they took over everything. And, but at the same time, they said, and of course, the Algerians are citizens too, but it, you know, it wasn't really true, you know, and that sort of thing. And then that all fell apart with the end of, you know, sort of colonialism. And so these countries had all this sort of trained people and stuff like that, who were always second class bureaucrats who suddenly took over things.
Mm.
And Senegal to this, or France to this day, all those countries are still dealing with this crap that they did to people in their colonies, you know, 100 years ago. Um, and you know, the worm turned. You know, it's suddenly, you know, and still, you know, the Europeans act like they're, you know, God's gift to mankind, and then now they're looking at the Asians who seem to have figured it out better than they ever did, you know, or certainly manufacturing and mercantilism and all that kind of stuff. You know, it's just like as if the Europeans were one group anyway. It's a bunch of people squabbling amongst each other. I
That's
don't know.
kind of,
I mean,
I
I
mean,
should be way more cynical than I am. You know.
well, and like literally from this story, you look at like all the stories all together, you string them together, and it's like humans just suck at trying to have a civilization. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
power hungry ones come and topple the one that was power hungry before so that they can have their reign, and then another power hungry one. And it's like, it makes me wonder, like, how much longer is this all gonna carry
Oh,
on?
it's gonna.
Because
I
like
think.
it doesn't work, and it just keeps being the next one and the next one and the next one and the next one. And like, when is enough enough?
Oh,
Why
I think
why do we have to
until we're
fight like
gone.
this? Huh?
It'll go on until we're gone. I mean,
You
and
think
I
that's a cynical thought right there. I'll give you that.
well, you know, Martin Luther King, the arc of justice is long, and
Yes.
I feel
Yes.
that,
Yeah.
but that arc of justice is like a millimeter away from just collapsing and going back to pure hell.
I
I mean,
know.
every culture, and ours
It's fragile.
is could be one of those. I mean,
Yeah.
everyone, it's just there. It's like
Yeah.
Putin decides to invade Ukraine, which was rolling along, and it was a sweet place to be, and it's just hell.
Yeah.
You know, and if he gets overthrown, then maybe it'll happen to Russia. You know, I mean, it's just
It's just a chain of pain that makes me a little bit sick to have to look at it. And so I bury my head in the sand on like world events, and listening to you, I'm just like,
yeah, yeah. Don't look at world events for.
well, and but then it's like, okay, I don't want to stick my head in the sand, but I also don't want to just look at and feed the cycle of the chain of pain. Like I want something different. I
I think every generation is offered the opportunity to try to deal with those assholes. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, and you go from, you know, I call it civic society to, I don't know, let's call it barbarism or something like that. You know, to dog eat dog,
Uh-huh.
and you slowly build up civic society, and suddenly women are straight safe on the streets, and people aren't shooting each other and stuff like that. And so at some point, it never peaks at utopia or nirvana or any place like that. But at some point, it's gets as civic as it's going to be, and then something happens, and it goes back to a cycle, and the barbarians rise up again. It's the barbarians, time to shine, and so they're back there again. And I mean, in our life, I can look at some people and I can tell this person is really interested in civic society, and this person is really interested in taking what they can get
Yeah.
and having power and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
people are a mix of that. I mean, and no one's perfect either way, but there are people who tend towards this, and there are people who tend towards
Mhm.
that. And
Mhm.
so the hope is that every time you drop, you have a you go retrograde. It's not as
Yeah.
far as it was before, but that I don't think there's any guarantee to that. I don't think so. So
That's true. Yeah.
yeah, if you want to think on another time scale,
Love that
I mean,
skills.
I bet the Velociraptors were no fun either.
At least
They're
they're not
gone,
here anymore.
they're
Yeah.
out of it. And so,
One problem at a time.
here's this planet with carbon and solar energy and water, and
It's a
and
paradise.
we've gone through how many times of uh, life gathering and building and da da da, and then just total collapse and this, reptiles made it through as birds, but that's about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Basically, most of it just falls apart. And 60 million years from now, there may be something. There will be something total. I mean, you and I are part Neanderthal and part Denisovian and part, we're all these other things that we have evolved in our 50,000 years, and almost in to where we can find out information about it, and we're going to be different 50,000 years from now, or we may wipe ourselves out. We may blow up the planet and it'll have to start all over again. But it's blown up and had to start all over again numerous times, and maybe one of those times it will
Mm.
be a type of creature that doesn't have all this crap in them, this desire. Yeah, desire, I'll call it desire, this willingness to just override everything for personal
And
pleasure.
it's fear. It's fear of your own personal scarcity that leads
Hmm.
you to harvesting from
Hmm.
other people,
Hmm.
like, and so at that point, it's like the fear itself is truly the cancer eating away at civic
Hmm.
society. And it makes me wish that the people who are for civic society would be as ferocious a warrior as the people who are for the barbarism.
Slippery slope.
I
I mean, I understand it. It's like, why can't you, with your words, convince people to go against their nature? I mean, this is human nature. This civic society is human nature, and barbarism is human nature.
mm, I
They're
do
inherent.
like that they're
Yeah.
both us. They're
Hmm.
both like
Hmm.
representations of what we're
Yeah.
capable of. And yeah, like I wish for my words to move out into the world and really just for my own choice to be that I I be as passionate as the ones who are afraid for their life and fighting and doing the things that they think they have to survive. I don't
Yeah.
feel that pressure, right? Like I feel
Yeah.
like I'm carving out an existence that doesn't have that fear pressure of like
Yeah.
if they have more, then I won't have enough. It's like, no, I know it doesn't work like that. We're all in this together. Okay, a rising
Mhm.
tide lifts all of us. We all need to chip in what we have and
Mhm.
share and all of these concepts that it's so simple until somebody's worried that they're not going to have enough and they start hoarding and then the other one gets worried because now like they
Mhm.
have too much and I'm not going to have enough and now they're doing it and like you said like it just all falls apart. And it is fear. And so yeah, I wish that there was as much courage, as much passion, as much desire on the part of the ones who are chill and knowing peace and like for them to show up as ferociously as the other ones do, to be as confident in what they're doing as the ones who are fighting it out, you
Well,
know?
trying to figure a way to be civil and win, it comes down to voting, right? And so it also
Mm,
comes down to trying to suppress the people who don't think it as you do. And yet, so far, I think one side is saying, yeah, everybody living in this, area should have a say on what goes on.
mhm.
All should have a say on how we treat each other, how our government, So you've got a group saying that, and then you've got a group saying, keep those people out of here. And the ones that are here that think like that, let's see how we can keep them from voting. It's just it's
If
just
you
sort of
have to take power away from a single other person, you don't have any power.
mhm,
You have nothing at
mhm.
that point. And that is the cancer that is imploding, is like people thinking that that's how you're going to be powerful, is by disempowering a bunch of other people. What the hell? Oh, that makes me mad. That makes me really mad to think about, like, why don't you empower yourself? If your philosophy is really that great, why don't you let everybody vote and let's see if the votes shake out?
Right.
If you're really here doing something that is for the best good of society, then let society pick you. And if you have to disempower people to keep yourself in power, that's not real power.
Well, I don't disagree with you,
Yeah,
but
no, I'm not trying to be
there's
hostile at you. But
but that's the way it is. That there are people who, you know, they'll hold on to every little thing they can until their good for nothing children waste it. I mean, it's
yeah,
just weird. Yeah.
it is.
Anyway, are we off topic again? Probably are.
Well, I feel like that was a really good
Mhm.
summary down to, cover this legacy of violence that exists in the world. That I feel like your story today, like, really pulled back the curtain on anybody who is like me, not really paying attention a whole lot as much as I should. I don't even know if that's a thing, but looking at it today, like, yeah, I want something different for the world. And I know that I can't take anybody else's power to decide anything for them. So I can only decide for myself. I can only use my power to show up in places where I feel like my voice might be able to make a difference. And I hope that other people will do the same, to use the power that you have to show up in the ways that are important to you, to make an impact in whatever teeny tiny little way. It probably doesn't even matter in the grand scale of 120 million years, like how we situated it down into this episode. Like, there's a lot rising and falling in the grand scheme of all the things, and you got to wonder if, like, the actions of one minuscule individual, like, does that even really matter? But I just keep hearing the quote in my head, like, the only thing that's needed for evil to persist is for good men to do nothing. Like, that's what I'm saying about the ones who want it to be civil, fight just as hard as the ones that are trying to tear it apart. Please, believe in that fight because it needs the opposition. Otherwise, it's unimpeded and runs rampant, you know?
Before we leave Africa, would like to say that the average African knows a lot more about America than the average American knows about Africa. We
Yeah.
basically can, well, some of us can find Africa on a map, but no idea of how to live in without a lot of material support and electricity and running water and all that. Just no idea. Um, when I was there, cell phones didn't exist. Yet people could listen to BBC radio. I remember it was Chief Mboj in the Gambia. We were sitting around listening to BBC one night, and it must have been, I think it was during Trump or during Reagan's years, and Star Wars was, and there was like, how do we wipe out the Russians before they wipe us out? And I remember him saying to me, and he's a guy who spoke 11 languages and had traveled some and stuff like that, but he was just sitting in his village. And he said, "What's with you and the Russians? I mean, I'm sitting here. I'm going to go if you guys can't sort this out. What?" And I go, I can't explain it. I mean, it's just it's the wrong people are making decisions is how I would explain it on both sides. I mean,
Yeah.
and convincing the people that they should be leading to common sense, convincing them of an abstraction that is going to absolutely destroy what they have instead of trying to preserve what they have and make sure that other people share in it so that they are happy. It's just this giant thing. And this after this old guy, and he was smart, he was wise, and all that kind of stuff. But he was, he said, explain to me, why this is. And I said, I can say why it is. I can't explain it. It's folly. It's people striving for false things. It's
Striving, I think, is a great
yeah,
word to kind of sum it all up. Like
yeah,
the, yeah, why it's a conflict of ideologies, and then the insecurity that says, I need you to believe what I believe so I can feel like I'm doing the right thing.
mhm,
Like, freaking get over the differences and just leave each other alone. But no, like, we need everybody to believe what we believe so that we can be shored up in our beliefs. It's like, again, if that's what you need, you're not comfortable in your beliefs. Like, why don't you start there? And again, leave everybody else alone.
well, it's funny, the zeitgeist, the cultural, Europe has had a long run of saying this is what's cool and this isn't cool and this is what's good and this isn't good and this is what's intelligent and this is, and that's crumbling. I mean, I mean, every Senegalese in the furthest village now almost has a telephone, and they're banking on that phone. I mean, they're paying for. I mean, it's much more sophisticated than we're only starting to get close to what you can do with a phone in terms of commerce that poorer places in the world have picked up on like that and are doing all
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. And then and that then you've got this Asian you know uprising of abilities and manufacturing and commerce and all that kind of stuff that I think is is going to change the world. What that economist Stiglitz said. Uh, China had the world's greatest GDP up until Mao. I mean, it was by far the biggest economy until Mao, but it was all internal but there's just so many people, and and then Mao set it back. The Great Leap Forward, ha ha ha. Just set them back, and he said it's going to be there again, or it's very close to being there now. But it sounds like they're starting to crumble a little again too. And why wouldn't you expect the U.S. to crumble? I mean, we had remarkable um, sort of assets, resources to do what we. I mean, it's just like this. Once the Indians were taken care of, it was like this brand new half a world. That these European countries could just and we as our own colonizer could just take care of. That doesn't last forever. I mean, we're still struggling to be on top. But that that takes some wisdom, and I think we don't have a monopoly on that. So I don't know. I think we're gonna have to learn how to be a colony at some point because that's probably going to happen, and it's probably going to be ugly. Um, so enjoy your day.
Thanks for listening. We appreciate it. Dude, I I'm a big fan of facing and naming what is real.
Mhm.
Like the whole skipping over this part to jump to like, oh, it's fine and like it's better than it's ever been. And like some of that is true. And there are metrics that we could point to that say it is. There are metrics we could point to that say it's not,
Mhm.
And if we want it to be better, if we want a better quality of life for ourselves, our communities, our global colony, then it takes a lot of people, a lot of individuals looking at what's real and deciding that, like, yeah, I'm not going to settle for that. I'm going
Mhm.
to work on it inside myself to figure out like how do I personally evolve this in my own life? How do I personally in my own life make sure that I don't take power from other people in order for me to feel good about myself? How can I be a model of that on a scale of one? And again, I don't know where that goes or if it even matters, but I need to feel like I'm doing something because it's
Mhm.
really depressing to look at this world when you really get right down to it.
But that feeling, you're not the first person in the world to have that feeling, or the first generation, or the first millennial.
No
I mean,
doubt.
it is a part of the human condition. It's a part of uh, what we are. I guess a rational mind includes that in it. I
Yeah.
mean, it's rare to see any other species just kill for no reason, but they'll kill for food, or they will. But we have opposable thumbs and brains, big brains that require a lot of food just to keep our brains running,
Yeah.
and have allowed us to be hoarders and greedy, and think out of, well, what are we going to have to eat next year? I mean, it's not like the birds of the air or the flowers of the field that don't think about that sort of thing. They just,
They're eating today's meal and
yeah,
yeah, being more in the moment.
yeah.
Yeah. I don't know what the answer is,
Well,
obviously, but
who does? Have you met the person who knows what the answer is?
no, right. And like and yeah. So it really does come back to like I personally don't even care what people want to believe or what way they want to live on this planet. Like I personally would love it if everybody would just show up and do whatever they think is right.
Mhm,
And the part that aggravates me more than anything is people sitting on the sidelines saying that their individual life just isn't big enough to make an impact. Like
mhm,
I'm just one person, so I don't matter. So me doing the thing, me having the voice, me, whatever doesn't matter. And yeah, it does matter. It's everything. It's
mhm,
yeah, it requires a lot of individuals having a direction, a pull of where is your heart pulling you? It
mhm.
doesn't need to be the same as where mine is, but let it pull you somewhere. Let it move you into action in some way and do your best. That's all any of us can ever do, you know?
Well, those religions that try to take people to that place are probably as close to. I don't find any of our mainstream religions that come even close to that. They do well on a few things, um, but
Yeah.
most of them have. Most people who try to control other people have to come up with a set of abstractions that aren't reality, and then get people to strive towards them and believe them. And it's just it's a facade. It's
I
a
heard on a podcast this morning that belief drives action. So that's what I want more than anything else for every single person on the planet is to believe in their own action, that your action matters and that you can change the outcome of things, you know?
Mhm.
World history on some scale, like
Well, religions have tried. I mean, religions are a way of marshaling people to gain
controlling,
power and
like,
wealth. I mean, and the ones that say, okay, we have to marshal people to be kind and tolerant. I mean, they're on a better trajectory. But I don't know. Think about the Catholic Church and the Crusades, and then think about Islam. Both of them came out of trying to get people to behave better, and both of them have had powerful, I don't know, sports from that mission that just are bloody, you
yeah,
know?
yeah, act better or we'll hurt you. Like, what?
That's
What's going
that's
on?
yeah.
I'm confused.
Or
So,
you use the religion to to undertake what your bloody heart wants on undertaken in the world,
That's
and
another quote that I
that's
really
there.
love that
Yeah,
says religion makes good people better and it makes bad people worse.
yeah. I mean,
So,
that's
I
right.
mean, religion is truly neutral and it's a vehicle that,
Mhm,
people can get in that vehicle and they can drive it this way or they can choose to drive it that way. And that's kind of human nature to your point of like,
mhm,
we are the civil society and we are the
mhm,
barbarians that
mhm,
just want to survive. Like, we
mhm,
are in a real way wired for survival and then have these giant brains that hijack that survival
mhm,
instinct and turn it into all kinds of crazy ideas. And yeah, but that's the takeaway that I would love for people to know after this wild ride of an episode is that every single individual has a part to play and can take action that absolutely matters in the grander, bigger picture of our global colony, you know?
and agriculture, which is ostensibly what this was about in some ways, can go both ways too. Clearly, I mean,
Anything.
Borlaug and all that kind of stuff. The Green Revolution. Let's come up with specific breeds and varieties that respond to fertilizers that are not from here but have to come from West Africa and get shipped here, and then we'll have, well, 60, 80 years ago there was 1/4 of the population, if that, maybe 1/8 of the population of the world, and many of them were starving, and there's much less starvation now. So they could point to that and say, well, there's elements of success there too,
Sure.
but it also leads to an overpopulated planet. It leads to, it doesn't lead to status. I mean, STATIS, it doesn't lead to a static society. It leads to one of continual growth with the thought that um, energy, and there are no energy limits, that sort of thing.
Which
And
is not natural. I mean,
no,
nothing in the world works like that. Everything
no,
winters,
no,
everything goes dormant
no.
and
Everything
comes
has
back.
nighttime.
Right, exactly, every day. So it's not normal to, it's not natural, I should say, to think that growth just goes and never ends.
Mhm, mhm.
But
But so the agriculture that I was involved in the US was trying to sort through that and trying to figure out, well, how do we not get that, you know, fertilizer from Africa, but how do we use the sunlight coming down on this area or immediate surrounds?
mhm,
How do we harness that, not towards feeding, 10 billion people, but towards feeding the people that are here, that are on this place, and you know, there have been a lot of advances in that. At the same time, that other model has advanced way beyond these advances. I mean, this organic local system was here 80, 100 years ago. It was thrown out. We don't need farmers. We don't need, farming is not, what I always said is, the the pyramid of needs,
mhm,
the Maslow's pyramid, and down
mhm,
there on the basis is, food, shelter, those sorts of things.
mhm,
And then I say, and the pyramid of what we say people have to do has been inverted.
mhm.
And so agriculture, food is like this little point of the pyramid down there. People don't need to be involved in their most important thing.
Yeah.
We'll have 1/100th of the population involved in providing our most basic needs, and the rest are going to be up here providing insurance and building bass boats and
Yeah.
doing TikToks and stuff like that. And then we sort of brag about, look how we freed people from being in control of their most important needs. It's like, well, how can we let? And I mean, a lot of people are happy. Some people do not want to ever pull a carrot in their life. I mean, that's just the fact that's a fact. They don't
Yeah.
want they want it to show up and they stick it in their mouth. That's you know,
Yeah.
and if they don't have to get up off the couch, I mean, that's the next step, shoving it in through the door into the apartment, so that slides right in front of you on the couch, so you
Sure.
don't have
Drone
to.
delivery right to your lap. Yeah. Why not? It's, yeah. And it's hard to know, like, all the advancements that make it possible for people to have a better quality of life. And then you do zoom out through a little bit of time, and like, there's a cost to how long we live these days and how many of us there are, and on and on and on. Like,
Well, and
it's, yeah, it's,
and so much of it is, if it's available, humans will take it,
well,
and
yeah.
ask for more. It's like there's never a, "Gee, I'm satisfied."
Mm,
It's sort of like,
yeah.
"Well, what else?" Can we have bigger cars? Can we have, and so a lot of the renewable energy things go to that now. It's sort of
Yeah.
like, you know, people want more because they're figuring out ways to get more energy harvested beyond fossil fuels. And so that's just going to add to consumption. I mean, to some extent it doesn't, but that's one of the fallacies that people interested in green energy have to start confronting, is that it's not going to make a static economy where we have what we need at this point. It's going to make an economy where we want more than what we have even now. And
Mm.
if you looked at the lifestyle of, say, an American in 1960, it was comfortable.
Hmm.
It was extremely comfortable. We're like 4 times, 5 times past that in energy consumption now.
Yeah.
It's like, well, that wasn't comfortable enough. I could never go back to, you know, the enjoyable life we had in 1960. Like,
And it, like, what I see is like, we're going to be forced to, if
yeah,
we
yeah.
don't like make some real honest choices about, like, is just limitless consumption really the way to go? Limitless production, is that really the most important and wise marshaling of the limited resources that we have? Because they're not limitless. Like, even, the renewable options, like, there's still limits and infrastructure and resources, and, like, yeah, the episode of unanswerable questions. That's what we'll call this one. Because damn, this was a
Next time we'll
heavy
talk about
thing.
something we
But
can do something about.
sometimes, again, like, sometimes I'm just like really in the mood to face what's real and to let it fire me up a little bit and feel the fuel of that. And like, right, so then show up and make your choices on purpose, the ones that you can be proud of, because what other metric is there?
Mhm.
And yeah, I enjoyed this. I hope listeners did as well. It might not have been for everybody, and that's okay. I get that. Um, yeah, but we will be back with Dan on another episode to continue his story from where we're leaving off with his time in Africa, his wild time in Africa. And yeah, we'll pick this back up next week. Until then, take a second, like the episode if you're still hanging out, leave us a comment. Would love to hear your thoughts down below. That has got to be one of my favorite parts of these episodes, is whether they're in the comments or people message me directly or whatever, sharing the thoughts that, like, the reflections and thoughtfulness that these conversations spark for people. A lot of times they're taking it in places that we didn't even necessarily talk
Mhm.
about directly, things that I wouldn't have thought of. So yeah, I love the thoughtfulness that these conversations provoke. Maybe not always the most pleasant thoughts, but productive and beneficial, I would say, nonetheless. So until next time, thank you so much for tuning in and listening. I hope you take really good care, and so will we. Okay.
Bye.
Bye.